The enemy on his back asterisk, the sky was burning red above the ruined forest. Smoke thick and dark around every broken tree. And the smell of blood and fire filled the air like poison. Ethan stumbled forward, dragging his leg through the ash-covered ground, his arm bleeding and body shaking. But he didn't stop. His squad was dead. Their voices gone silent hours ago when the enemy rained fire from the sky. And now he was alone in enemy territory, with no food, no water, and a gun with only one bullet left. He pushed aside a scorched branch and found her lying in a crater, half buried in dirt and ash, blood flowing from her side. An alien queen. Not just any alien, but the enemy leader, the one responsible for killing thousands of humans. The one they all feared, the tall silver-skinned queen with glowing eyes and golden armor now cracked and burnt. He pointed his gun at her head and stepped closer, heart pounding like thunder. But then her eyes opened slowly. Her voice was dry, weak, but not cruel. "Water," she whispered. "Please." He stared at her, confused and frozen, because he had never imagined the queen of his enemies would beg him for mercy. She tried to move, but her arm collapsed under her, and she coughed out blood. Her face twisted in pain, not pride. Ethan lowered the gun, slowly, hand shaking, his brain screaming that this was a trap. But something in his heart said no. He took his last water packet from his pouch and knelt beside her, holding it to her lips, watching as she drank like a dying child. She looked at him, her glowing eyes soft now, confused. "You are helping me. You're dying," he said quietly, and I couldn't walk away. Her breathing slowed. But she nodded once, her eyes closing again as if trusting him. And that trust made something twist inside his chest. Ethan looked around, no shelter, no help, no other humans nearby, and then did the unthinkable. He lifted her. She was taller than him, heavier with armor and muscle, her body hot with fever, and yet he threw her over his back, groaning under the weight, and began walking. The war had burned the land into broken rocks and poisoned rivers. But Ethan knew one thing: the outpost was 30 miles west, past the dead zones, and he would get her there. Every step felt like dragging a mountain, her blood soaking his back, her armor cutting into his shoulder. But he didn't stop. Drones passed overhead, scanning for life, and he dropped into the mud with her on top, holding his breath until the lights were gone. At night, he made a fire in a ruined building, wrapping her in his torn jacket while she slept, her breath shallow, but still there. When he fed her dried rations, she ate with slow hands, her pride. "Forgotten. You should have left me," she said once, weakly. "They will kill you for this." "Then I'll die," he answered. "But I'm not leaving you here for the next 2 days." He carried her through a freezing storm, through old ruins full of rusted traps, and even past beasts that howled in the shadows. Once, she woke screaming, calling for her soldiers, and he held her gently until the fear passed. Another time, she whispered her name, Zariah, and he repeated it softly, as if it were a secret gift. She began to look at him differently, not as a human or an enemy, but as something else, something rare. On the 3rd night, they rested beside a dry riverbed, the moon above them silver and cold, and she reached out to touch his arm. "You risked death for me," she said, voice stronger now. "Why?" Ethan looked into her eyes, so alien, yet so tired, and said quietly, "Because you needed someone." She didn't answer, but her hand didn't pull away. As they rested, the stars above watched in silence. And for the first time since the war began, the queen of the enemy closed her eyes without fear, sleeping beside the man who carried her not as a trophy, but as a life worth saving. Asterisk 30 miles of silence. Asterisk the rain started before sunrise, cold and sharp like needles, soaking Ethan's uniform and chilling his skin to the bone. But he didn't stop walking. Zariah lay across his back, heavier now that her armor had soaked through, her breathing slow but steady against his neck. The mud pulled at his boots, and his legs trembled with every step. But he kept going because the nearest human outpost was still 15 miles away. He was almost out of food, almost out of strength, and deep inside enemy territory, but he was still moving, still carrying the alien queen who should have died in that crater. She hadn't spoken since the night before, when she asked why he risked his life for her, and now her silence felt heavier than her body. "Still with me?" he asked quietly. There was a soft hum in his ear, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Yes," she whispered, "still with you." A drone passed overhead, its red light sweeping across the trees, and Ethan dropped flat behind a broken pillar, shielding Zariah with his body. The light passed, but Zariah was shaking now, not from cold but from something deeper, something broken inside her. "My own soldiers left me," she said, voice cracked. "They fled when the battle turned. I was nothing to them once I felt Ethan didn't speak right away." But he adjusted her gently on his back and stood again. "I didn't," he said. They crossed an abandoned bridge later that morning, the planks rotting beneath their weight. And for a terrifying second, one cracked. Ethan slipped, both of them crashing hard against the wooden planks, and his ribs screamed in pain. Zariah groaned too, trying to roll off him, but he grabbed her waist and pulled her close. "You okay?" he asked, holding her tightly. "I should be asking you that," she whispered. They lay there in the rain for a minute, two enemies breathing the same air, one helping the other, and neither reaching for a weapon. Later, while resting under a shattered tower, Zariah stared at him for a long time. "You are not like the stories," she said. "They told us humans were cruel, weak inside, easy to break, but you are still walking, still carrying me." Ethan sat beside her, back against the cold stone, his arms shaking from exhaustion. "I'm no hero," he said. "I just couldn't watch you die." Zariah looked down at her silver fingers, her hand resting near his. "In my culture," she said, "when a male carries a queen through danger, he is tested. If he survives, she may claim him as mate, a rare ritual." Almost forgotten now, Ethan gave a tired laugh, thinking she was joking. "Guess I passed your weird alien dating test," but her face was serious. "You don't understand," she said. "If we reach safety and you live, tradition will see you as mine." Ethan blinked, unsure if she meant it as a promise or a warning. And before he could answer, she leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes. That night, the wind howled like ghosts across the land, and Ethan built a small fire inside a cave where the stone walls curved like a shelter. Zariah curled beside him, her body still hot with fever. And when he placed a damp cloth on her forehead, her hand caught his wrist. "Why do you care?" she asked again, voice soft. "Why not drop me and save yourself?" He looked down at her, her golden eyes now half-lidded and vulnerable. "Nothing like the fierce queen from before, because I've seen too much death," he said. "And saving one life, even yours, feels like something worth doing for a while." Neither of them spoke. Then Zariah reached for his hand under the blanket, her alien fingers cold but steady, and whispered, "Then I owe you more than a life." The silence stretched between them, not heavy, not awkward, just full of something unspoken. When Ethan finally fell asleep, she was still watching him, her heart full of confusion and something deeper than duty. As dawn broke, the cave lit with pale light, and she whispered one last thing to the sleeping soldier beside her. "If we survive, I will choose you." She chooses her mate. The ground trembled under his feet as Ethan stepped out of the forest, with Zariah still on his back, both of them soaked in blood and dirt, both barely alive. Ahead, the high walls of the human outpost rose behind steel gates, guarded by soldiers in dark armor, weapons ready, eyes sharp. Ethan raised one hand, but his legs gave out, and he collapsed on his knees, cradling the alien queen as she slid gently from his back into his arms. The nearest soldier shouted, "Enemy! Contact! That's a queen armed!" Others raised their rifles instantly, forming a circle around Ethan and Zariah. Fingers on triggers. Ethan held her tighter, ignoring the weapons, his voice hoarse from pain. She's not armed. She's wounded. I carried her here. Zariah opened her eyes weakly and placed one hand on his chest. She speaks truth, she said, her voice trembling but still full of command. I would be dead without this man. The commander stepped forward, his face unreadable. You brought the enemy queen here? You expect us to thank you. Ethan stood slowly, using the wall for balance, blood dripping from his mouth. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because she was a life worth saving, another soldier shouted. Protocol says we execute enemy leaders on sight. Zariah struggled to sit up, but Ethan held her steady. I am not here as a prisoner, she said. Louder now. I invoke the pact of meeting right ancient law of my people. He carried me, protected me, suffered with me. He is mine now. Touch him. And you declare war. Everyone went silent. The soldiers looked at one another, confused. The commander lowered his gun slightly, eyes narrowing. Is this true? He asked. Ethan. I don't know about their laws, Ethan said, but I didn't carry her 30 miles for her to be shot in the dirt. You want to kill her? You shoot me first. A long silence followed. Then, slowly, the commander waved his hand, and the soldiers lowered their weapons. Zariah collapsed again in Ethan's arms, breathing shallow. Medics rushed forward, checking both of them. One looked at the commander and said, they both need immediate medical care. He's got cracked ribs, internal bleeding. She's barely holding on. They were taken inside, placed on separate beds in the medical bay. Machines beeped. Nurses moved fast. And still, Ethan kept looking at her across the room. Hours passed. Zariah was healing faster. Her alien blood stronger than human medicine expected. Ethan, though, was barely conscious. Whispering her name through his fever, she got up in the night, weak but moving, and stood beside his bed. He opened his eyes and smiled faintly. You didn't leave, he said. I told you, she whispered. You're mine now, he gave a small laugh, wincing from the pain. I carried you because you needed saving, not because I expected a title or a throne. Zariah leaned close, her face inches from his, her hand resting on his chest. In my world, choosing a mate is not about power, she said softly. It's about trust, sacrifice, pain shared. You gave me all that without asking for anything. She kissed his forehead gently and stayed by his side the rest of the night. A few days later, the Galactic Council sent envoys. Humans demanded her return as a war prisoner, but she stood before them in full royal dress and declared her new alliance. This man saved the queen of my world. According to our ancient law, he is now royal consort. Any threat to him is a threat to my people. The council had no words. The war that had lasted 5 years ended in silence. And Ethan, he stood beside Zariah, no longer just a soldier, no longer just a man. He was her chosen mate, her protector, and now part of a new future built from ashes. As they left the human base together, side by side, their hands touched. The world had tried to burn them both, but they had found something stronger than hate, something sacred, something worth walking 30 miles for.